Hello and welcome to another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We are thrilled to be back for the new year, 2024. Our guest today is Doug Levy, a health communications expert. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. And shortly, we'll be live on Instagram as well. Just need one moment to fix that. Give me one moment here. This is a live show, and anything can happen. Let's see if this makes it go live on Instagram. Nope, not seeing it on Instagram yet. So unfortunately, that might not happen today. We'll take a look at it again. Oh, there we go. We're live on Instagram. That's great. So, again, thank you for joining us. Our first show of 2024. My name is Neil Parekh. I am the executive producer of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along and occasional guest host. I always say it's an incredible honor and a privilege to guest host Sri's show. Sri's been doing this for 8 years, almost 8.5 now. I still remember when he first gave me his Facebook password. Now, if you know Sri, you know how active he is on social media. He gave me his Facebook password and said, log in as me and carry on with the show because he was going to be traveling one weekend. And that still resonates. And it's just such an honor to carry that mantle. And it's been such a wild ride. We've had some incredible guests. Looking forward to today's show with Doug. Doug is a longtime viewer, a loyal viewer of the show. He wakes up at 5:30 in the morning local time in California to watch. He's up at 5:30, even earlier, probably 5 o'clock his time, to be a guest. So we're thrilled, and we're going to bring him on in just a few minutes. But first, let's just welcome some of the folks who are watching, who have joined us today. Shashi is watching on YouTube. Looking forward to this read along from Washington, D.C., not far from where I am in Springfield, Virginia. So, Shashi, thank you for joining us. We have Jonathan watching from a rather wet Greenwich Village. It was really wet here yesterday for us, so definitely can understand. Jimmy Carter, a relatively new viewer, or at least new to commenting, is watching from North Carolina. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining us. And Naomi Service is joining us, saying Happy New Year, albeit wet, from the Upper West Side. Now, we are live on, I mentioned, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, our Digimentors website, and Instagram. This is the second time we're going live on Instagram, so we're still working out some of the kinks. But if you are watching on Instagram, please leave a comment. Let us know, and we would love to have you join us. We are also, we have been live on Twitter for 2 years now, but for the first time, we can get comments on Twitter. So please leave a comment on Twitter so that we can watch what's going on. And I'm going to make sure. You know what? I think we're going to be live on Instagram. So I apologize for the delay. If you were looking for us there and came over, but now we are live on Instagram. So thank you for that. So make sure you put any comments. If you're watching on Twitter in particular, let us know, because that's a new platform for us in terms of bringing in comments. Sujana Chandrasekhar says happy snow weekend. Yes, our friends in the Northeast got snow, varying degrees, of course. And Ken Fisher is watching, saying, good morning, Neil and friends from East Central Iowa. It'll be fun to meet and hear from Doug. As I mentioned earlier, Doug Levy is our guest. He is a longtime friend of the show. Folks may recognize him from the comments. He is a health communications expert, a Peabody-award winning health communications expert. You can follow him on Twitter at SFDoug or on Instagram at Doug Levy NY. I want to give a shout out. Diane Stefani is watching on Instagram. Usually she's watching on Facebook, but I want to give her a shout out for watching on Instagram. And our friend PK Sharma is watching on Instagram as well. So thank you for joining us there. Linda Lawrence is watching from Long Island. The snow turned to rain. Yeah, it kind of, hopefully it'll wash away depending on how much you got. So it's always a question of that changeover. Diane has our first comment, leaving it in Instagram. So again, we have a split screen. I can't show it on the screen for you, but I can read it off my split screen, saying good morning from Margate, New Jersey, and excited to hear from Doug Levy. And I will point out, Diane, Doug's Instagram handle is Doug Levy NY. Doug Levy NY. So you want to make sure you catch that. So with that and with those preliminaries, and again, a last technical note I want to offer is that if you are watching on Facebook, please make sure to press play on the video. If you're watching it in your stream, if you've seen it, someone shared it, please go ahead and press play so that you can actually comment and we can put that comment on screen. It definitely is what makes these shows so interactive and so much more fun than a regular Zoom meeting. So with that, let's go ahead and check out what's in the paper this week. And we'll just do our quick preview, and then we'll make sure to bring on Doug and talk about his work in communications. And before I do that, I got it. I was going to sneak away, but I can't. I got to bring on. Whoops, got to bring on my mom, watching from Tampa, Florida, not from Hastings. She's in Florida for the winter. Hi, Mom. How are you doing? Thank you for joining. Thank you for watching, as always. And Doug is also watching on Facebook. He's clarifying that his Instagram handle is a reflection of his bi-coastal background. So thanks for the clarification, Doug. And with that, we will now switch over to the paper and take a look at do a little preview of what's to come. So, the front page, we have obviously a big story, how Harvard came to oust its president, from hoping to heal to needing to move on. A lot of that is how the Harvard Corporation, the board, at first backed Claudine Gay and then stepped away from her. I also thought it was interesting that her initial statement was very thin, both statements, but then she came up with a follow-up op-ed in the Times. Definitely worth digging into. The lead: to gain backing, Trump exercises fear and favor, a methodical effort. The display story is actually a fun story by Andrew Kay. Here lie Rex, Fluffy, and a mystery woman. The pet cemetery was used to odd requests. Then came Patricia Chartez. Below the fold, FAA grounds some Boeing MAX 9s after scare. The Boeing MAX had two crashes several years ago that grounded the entire fleet. That's certainly something we can talk to Doug about in terms of communications and how you handled that kind of challenge. Time of tension for Hollywood: speech season. As Hollywood heads into the heart of its award season, a 3-month orgy of frothy self-celebration and pop culture glamour, celebrities and their handlers find themselves with a serious decision to make. What, if anything, to say? The decision to make. What, if anything, to say about the Israel-Hamas war? Great to see that nut graph right at the top, right in the lead. You know exactly what you're going to get with that article. The other story on the front page: colleges deride the rankings, but some pay to flaunt them. This is the College Rankings U.S. News and World Report. At the bottom, we've some of the reefers here. This one looks particularly good in the national section, The Spirit of 48 Revisited. Stop us if you've heard this before. The parallels between Biden in 2024 and Harry Truman in 48. So that's the front page. The Sunday opinion section, A Great City Can't Stop Evolving. New York could make room for 1 million people by Vishan Chakrabarti. I Don't Want to Live in a Time Capsule by Benjamin Applebaum, who's on the editorial board for the Times. The history and complex meaning behind the Blue Lives Matter flag. The departure of Harvard's president is about much more than plagiarism. And Caught in Taylor Swift's Lavender Haze by Anna Marks. We can't go a week without talking about Taylor Swift. I am surprised that they don't have a more prominent story about January 6th, which was yesterday. In case anyone was wondering, January 6th actually did happen. It was an insurrection. It was absolutely awful to watch. My neighbor is a Capitol Hill police officer, and it is just absolutely ridiculous that people want to deny that it happened. Absolutely ridiculous. Can a flip phone fix your screen addiction? That's the cover story in Sunday Business by Kashmir Hill. I tried it. It was a huge pain. I loved it. Interesting. Unions backing for Israel shifts to protests. A generational change has exposed philosophical rifts in the labor movement. I'll be interested in seeing that. As a former staffer for SEIU in Washington State, and my mom is a retired member of SEIU 1199, Service Employees International Union. I'll be curious about that. At the bottom, a column about retiring work friend when your colleague's daily constitutional takes place during the Zoom call. That's not good. And then AI, far out, man. An update to ChatGPT has allowed users to take a trip to the absurd side. We'll take a look at that. Sunday Styles. You have to flip over to see what the story is about. The people who brought you Travis Kelce. I remember seeing this online. Much of the football star's ascent has been years in the making, the result of a business plan by the Eanes brothers, if I'm pronouncing that right. That's what the full page looks like. And this was before he started dating Taylor Swift. We can't go more than one section without talking about Taylor Swift. I'm saying this as a Swiftie dad, so with all due respect to Tay-Tay. Arts and leisure. Meet the African artist driving a cultural renaissance. An Oscar winner, filmmaker, author, pop star, and more are among the creative talents at the center of a global shift. I will say this is an interesting choice for a cover image. If you can see the top half and then the bottom half, it's an extreme close-up of someone's face. The caption, Africa is a powerful place from which to examine the issues that will dominate the next century, says Leslie Loco, architecture curator of the 2023 Venice Biennale. Interesting. We have the Oscars special, Arts and Leisure. Lily Gladstone rises to the occasion. And then more articles about Paul Giamatti and let's see, an article about Killers from Martin Scorsese's movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, if I'm not mistaken. And then an article about The Taste of Things. The book review, here's an interesting, if you follow this, read this and learn. They have the text on the headline on the side corner, and then the subhead, for decades, Julian Rolfo's novel Pedro Paramo has cast and then you got to turn this way, uncanny spell on writers. A new translation may bring it broader appeal. Curious what the internal layout is. And then the New York Times Magazine, letting Naomi die. Treatment wasn't helping her anorexia, so doctors allowed her to stop, no matter the consequences. But is a palliative approach to mental illness really ethical? We will take a look at that and all the news that's fit to print this Sunday, January 7, 2024. But before we do that, we're going to welcome our guest, Doug Levy. Again, as a reminder, Doug is a Peabody award-winning health communications expert. You can find him on Twitter at SFDoug and on Instagram at Doug Levy NY. And before I bring Doug on, I want to just acknowledge a few comments that came in. PK Sharma on Instagram, wishing you and all your viewers a very happy and prosperous new year. From PK Sharma and family from Riverdale, New York. And Diane is tagging the correct Doug Levy this time, Doug Levy NY in Instagram. We have other comments. Rahadyan is saying Happy New Year. May 2024 be much better than 2023 and full of blessings for all. And he's saying good morning from Bayshore, Long Island. And our friend Stefan Kaplan is watching from a snowy northern New Jersey. Doug knows he loves the fog and snowy mornings. It's that wet, heavy snow, not as fluffy as I like. Plus, I wouldn't miss Doug. And Doug is sharing that no problem to tag the @Doug Levy in Instagram. He's a Boston photographer who has a good following. So maybe this happens more than once. We'll find out. And I want to point out, Stefan shared a really great photo of the snow yesterday. And Stefan, do you get out and play in the snow first, or are you going to do that after the read along? Just curious. So with that, let's bring on our friend and loyal viewer and early riser, Doug Levy, coming from California. Doug, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
And I should point out, you're not from your usual haunt in Northern California. You're in Southern California.
I'm in Hollywood.
Right?
Hollywood, excuse me.
Hollywood. And you are. Can you point out? Can you show to our viewers? I'm going to put you in full screen. Where's the Hollywood sign over your shoulder? Right there. Yeah. We will
come out soon. We should get the first light in about an hour. So before the end of the show, I'll point it out again.
It is 5:47 LA time. And I'm sure Doug was up even earlier
I've already been to the gym and walked around the block. And
wait a minute. Well, let's walk this back for a second here. I mean, I was going to give you maybe 5 o'clock, jump in the shower, be ready, log in. We make our guests log in 15 minutes early just to check everything out. Help us out here, Doug. If you already hit the gym and we're outside, what time were you up this morning?
4
o'clock. Anyone else up at 4 o'clock?
You make it sound like that's unusual.
I make it sound like it's really. I mean, so I can't say the same because for years I actually used to wake up at about 4 o'clock. 5 o'clock was waking up late. When I worked with United Way, I did effectively internal communications for our United Way network. I did a morning newsletter, and I used to wake up and do the newsletter and then get ready and go to the office in the morning. So I was up at 4:35 pretty regularly. So much so that I used to watch the sunrise from our old apartment. We had a beautiful view of sunrise. So I'd be in the middle of my work. I'd stop, get up, take a couple pictures, and then get back to my work. So, but thankfully those days are behind me now. I get to wake up at 7:30 to make sure Emily gets off to school. But 4 is definitely early.
I wake up at 7 on your time zone.
Yeah. Okay, sure. So you haven't given up on the East Coast.
Well, in fact, I mean, the very practical reason is that most of my clients that I'm working with are East Coast based, or are other people like me who work on East Coast time, no matter where they are.
Sure.
So it's just my habit. And as you've mentioned previously, I used to do morning drive radio. So
morning radio,
my start time was 4 a.m. on a good day.
Absolutely. So just following up on, first of all, Pradnya is joining us from Silver Spring, Maryland, again in the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Pradnya, always great to see you.
Whatever happened to calling it the Mid-Atlantic?
Well, the Mid Atlantic is more broad, right? That would pick up Pennsylvania. I would think it might
Okay,
go
I'm still
further
getting
south.
used to the DMV thing because when I lived there, I never heard that,
Really
and I hear people use it all the time now.
interesting. I wonder whether it evolved. We lived here from 95 to 2001, moved to Seattle, and then moved back here in 2015. So it may be more recent vintage.
I
When were
mean,
you
these
out
days,
here on the
uh,
East Coast?
I was in DC until 1997.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I mean, I got a memo from one of my clients recently. For those of you in the DMV,
Well, and I'm sure the Washington Post has something to do with that. I know they have a newsletter that references the DMV, so there's probably some cultural kind of you know push that's going on there.
and I'm going to show my age. The first time I saw that, my brain thought DMZ.
Oh, okay. See, the first time Cerise saw it, he was thinking Department of Motor Vehicles, and so like Sonny and others from the area had to re-educate him on that.
Yeah, exactly. So
Um,
it's a good example of not good communications.
a good example of not communicate the jargon and acronyms, the scourge of any organization when you join and you have a new person there. I still remember first meetings, we'd have to stop every 2 minutes. Oh, that's another acronym, got to explain it. So and so is not going to know what we're talking about. um Prednia says you're an inspiration for being up early, so take it, enjoy it, which are good. Stefan is saying he's usually up at 5 a.m. Now, so he loves the quiet of the early mornings, but Duck beats me with his 4 a.m. I know Stefan likes to get out into nature in the morning. Love those photographs from the celery farm in particular, Stefan. If you're not following him on socials, Stefan is at Spin It Social across all the platforms. Um, Pradnya is saying we pretend Delaware and Pennsylvania don't exist. That would be part of a larger Mid-Atlantic region, I would think. And Linda is talking about the DMV being the Department of Motor Vehicles. Um, so all of that aside, Doug, let's dig into some of the content that we want to cover this morning. Before we talk about your book, actually the second edition of this book, the Communications Golden Hour, I want to make sure it comes through with the glare. Um, I want to kind of set the stage a little bit. You give for folks who know you through social media, through comments on the read along. Um, Tell us a little bit about your background. You mentioned you'd spent some time in DC, but give us a little bit of the overview, the bio, and really kind of what led you up to this point to write a book like this and then write a second edition. Um, who is Doug Levy?
I'm probably just like everybody else who has really good, really significant ADHD, and I've done a lot of different things, many of which were done at the same time. But I started out in journalism. That was my career going back to, I wanted to be a journalist even in high school. And from 1983 to 2000, I was happily employed as a journalist, most of that time in Washington, D.C. I was a reporter for USA Today covering healthcare for most of the 1990s, worked in a variety of other media organizations, including in network radio for a number of years, which is where some of the award-winning work was done. I was part of an investigative news team that did some pretty cool things back then. But I jumped the fence into communications consulting in the 2000s, wound up as an academic communicator at the University of California School of Medicine, University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine, working with then Dean David Kessler, who had been the FDA commissioner when I covered the agency. And I didn't know him that well, but he knew that I was a decent reporter and covered stories with a pretty good record of accuracy. So he asked me to join his team at UCSF, which was a pretty amazing experience. And one of the things that became part of my job at UCSF was emergency management. I was a part of the emergency management team there and worked very closely with the University Police Department on how do we deal with this social media thing that is happening. How do we reach people in labs who might not be paying attention to phones or whatever? What do we do if there's an emergency? How do we get people the information? And years earlier, I actually was a volunteer firefighter in Maryland for a bunch of years. So I had some emergency services experience too. Bottom line, I kind of really glommed into that, and the emergency communications piece became a really big thing for me. And when I left academic medicine in 2000, the end of 2015 is when I left Columbia University from a communications leadership role. I decided it was time to codify everything that I had learned about emergency communications into a book, which is what the first book was. This was geared mostly to law enforcement and other public safety professionals. How do you get an emergency message to the right people at the right time in a way that they're going to actually do what you need them to do at that moment? There's lots of ways to reach people, but if you don't give them the right message, are they going to get out of the way of the emergency, or are they going to get themselves into further danger? I'm gratified that there was a really good reaction to the first volume. So the second volume is something we started working on. Well, we actually started working on it in 2020, but then the pandemic hit and that kind of changed things. But it's gotten a bit bigger. It's now a full-on textbook on communications, but not just for public safety. It covers many sectors. It's broadly applicable to any professional communications role. It's targeted to corporate business, healthcare, public safety, municipal government. The folks who are most likely to have an emergency message. I deliberately did not go into detail on schools because that's kind of its own set of complexities.
Sure.
Although the messaging, the core of the book is how do you craft an emergency message, or really any message, the right way?
Sure.
That's applicable across the board. But there's individual chapters with experts sharing what they've learned in their experience, and hopefully this will help everybody do better.
I'll offer our first endorsement of the morning. Stefan says that your comms insight is so key. He recently gifted the Communications Golden Hour to a local volunteer emergency worker, telling him it's required reading.
Thank you.
And I should say that, in addition to Stefan's endorsement, we also have Sri's endorsement. And I'm going to read from the back of the book. Everyone who is interested in public communications should have this book as a reference guide, as well as to answer Doug's clarion call for better, clearer, more accurate information in times of crisis. Sri Srinivasan's blurb on the back of your book, which is not just high praise, but from someone we all respect and admire. So that makes a huge difference. And so a couple other comments that are coming in. I want to point out Sujana Chandrasekhar has our first ever comment from Twitter. And we were able to show it on the screen. So thank you, Sujana. You can tag people in Facebook, but not on Twitter. She's calling it something different. I don't know. I refuse to call it that, the X feed. But I don't know if that's user error, Sujana. It might just be the way the feed works. And Pradnya is tagging people as is Stefan. Pradnya tagged the nonprofit communications professionals, which is great. Thank you, Pradnya. And then Pradnya is also, is this live on LinkedIn so we can tag folks there? It should be live on LinkedIn on Sri's page. I'm checking right now, in fact, and I see it. Yeah, it's live on Sri's account. So if you go there, you'll be able to find it as well. But thank you for checking, Pradnya. So as far as communications are concerned, Doug, and kind of bringing it into, more of the present day, you actually wrote before. Now, this came out before the Communications Golden Hour, the Coronavirus Handbook. Was that
Actually,
after?
that was a quick turnaround. I think it was March of 2020, and I was in what we thought was the home stretch of the completion of the second edition of the first book.
I see.
And I literally was on a flight to Seattle, where I was going to be working for a week, holed up in a cottage in an undisclosed location, and coronavirus, we weren't calling it COVID yet, was clearly going to be a much bigger thing than we thought. So my editor and I decided to pivot. And what we did was we took the relevant parts of the first book, added some public health focused content, and wrote some new content that was targeted directly at the crisis that was right then occurring. So that was like a quick turnaround book that we hope did some good. I'm pretty sure it's not officially available from anybody now, because it is not up to date with what we know about COVID, but the public health messaging principles are in the new book.
Sure. And I bring that up because, over the last few weeks, even not even months, there has been a significant uptick in COVID, both, in terms of the media. I'm seeing in the Post, Washington Post, New York Times, I think you mentioned the LA Times as well, all covering the recent uptick. And I've seen just within my own circles, really from Facebook, but also from through family, a number of people getting COVID. Some of them for the first time, which is, people who haven't gotten, it finally got me 4 years later. And it's really surprising. I woke up this morning to the news that a colleague of mine from the Unitarian church I go to has a very severe case of COVID. It's not, it used to be mild symptoms, but this is, there's some serious cases going on out there.
There are, and what's kind of frustrating for those of us that work in public health and adjacent fields, a lot of these cases are preventable. A disturbingly large number of Americans have not gotten the new vaccine, and the vaccine that was released in September is a new formulation geared toward the variants that are circulating.
And I want to repeat that. It's not a booster. It's not optional. It's not a, nice to have. It's an absolutely new vaccine, right?
Yeah, because it's the same chemistry, but the actual instructions to the immune system are different because the virus has evolved. And the vaccines that were released previously were enormously effective and incredibly safe and truly astoundingly good from a public health standpoint, and really every standpoint that I can think of. But the immunity against the original COVID virus is not what you need now. You need protection against Omicron and the variants that we are seeing now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't, bottom line, if you haven't had a vaccine against COVID since September 2023, please get one. You go to covid.gov, locate a place to get a vaccine near you. It's not free for everybody anymore because the government's not paying for it the way they were, although there are ways to get it covered if you can't afford it. It's just like a flu shot. It will help save lives if more people get these shots.
Important public health advice already this morning. Go to covid.gov to find out where you can get a vaccine.
And just in spirit of full disclosure,
Yeah.
one of my clients is a contracting company that supports the government agency that is behind that. So I have a bit of a vested interest there, but just from a public health professional standpoint, the data is overwhelming on this.
Sure.
The vast majority of all of the COVID deaths since 2020 have been preventable if people get the vaccines. The other piece is if you get sick, don't delay getting tested so that you can get treatment if it's appropriate for you. And unfortunately, a lot of physicians are not acting quickly either. We've got a pretty amazing drug called Paxlovid. I took it because I got really sick in September, and I'm really glad because I very likely would have had a much worse outcome.
That's right.
If for that. I mean, it's like 80% or better effective.
I remember when you posted about that. Dr. Chandrasekhar, Sojan Chandrasekhar, reflecting on your earlier comments, early inaccurate messaging was so key in early 2020, and always, of course. I want to call out both you, Dr. Chandrasekhar, other friends, Lippy, Roy. We had them on the show on the read along. If you might recall, in the first 2 months after COVID hit, we added a half-hour segment with a physician to answer questions, particularly around COVID, and that's effectively what launched She's on Call that Dr. Sojana Chandrasekhar and Marina Kurian hosted as its own show later on Sunday morning. But having that the information, having a space for people to ask questions and to really understand what was going on was so critical. So Sojana, thank you so much. And again, she's leaving that comment on Twitter. Stefan says that masking works. I didn't have a cold for 3 years. Stefan is saying this. He let his guard down, but was boosted, and it finally nailed me, referring to COVID. Thankful for science and the vaccines. Absolutely. And I want to say hi to Paula Kiger, who's watching from Tallahassee, Florida. Paula, thank you so much. Longtime producer of the show, longtime supporter of the work that we've done. Paula, thank you always for your sage advice and counsel, and for all the feedback. Both before and after shows as we were prepping. It really means a lot. As we mentioned earlier, that we're live on Instagram. We're also getting comments from Twitter for the first time. Rahadian says, someday I hope to see and hear the read along on other platforms such as Threads and Blue Sky. It's just a matter of time, I'm sure. Just a matter of time until it's not so much our figuring that out. It's the platform. It's the, for example, Instagram until recently did not let anyone else go live on its platform with using a third-party software. You had to use your phone to do that. Twitter didn't let the comments come through. I mean, they have to make technical changes on their part. We'd love to be able to do that. StreamYard would love to be able to do that, but we're kind of at the behest of various platforms. Dr. Tachi is joining us from Fort Lauderdale, watching on YouTube. So, Dr. Tachi, thank you so much for joining us. It's great. I want to turn back to your the book, to the Communications Golden Hour, Doug, and specifically some of the lessons learned from your work. And I thought it was actually really great. Just the way that it was set up. Now, this is, as folks might, when Doug pointed out, it's a thick book. There is a lot. There are examples. It's built off of work with various first responders, right, from police, fire, et cetera, not just health communications. But you really did a good job of boiling it down into some really easy lessons learned. The first one, it can happen anywhere. And we've seen this with school shootings. Ken is watching from Iowa. There was a school shooting in Iowa just last week where a 6th grader was killed, which is just incredible. You know, when I worked with United Way, we would see communities across the country. You'd wake up and another community was this was particularly around mass shootings. But one I thought it was really interesting, your second point, every person in your organization represents the entire organization. And that could be for good or for ill, right? If someone does something, um, it'll reflect on the whole organization, but also everyone has a chance to do the organization proud, right?
And there have been some really fabulous examples of exactly that, where whether it's the barista in a cafe somewhere being gracious to a person who's there was actually a video that went around about a week ago of an airline gate agent who was being harangued by somebody who was upset. I don't know all the details, and I don't know who was right or wrong, but the whole point of the video being circulated was how calmly and respectfully this gate agent was reacting to this person that was screaming and yelling. And that made that airline look really good.
Sure, sure. You also mentioned that you need to establish trust early and often with your audience and constituents. Effectively, getting in touch with folks, and this is really geared toward public information officers. Getting in touch before you need to get in touch with folks. I worked in when I was at Washington State. I worked with I did media relations for our local United Way, and that was really the first thing I did when I was working in a new county. I didn't have experience there, and I met with the local daily newspaper reporter and editor, called on all the local weeklies and the radio stations, and those relationships really made a big difference later. And we actually dealt with a disaster as well. I don't know if you would have remembered or heard about the mudslide in Oso, Washington, back in 2014, I think it was. No, 2012. I think it was right before Emily was born. Um, it was a huge deal, but we were then a known quantity for folks. That made a huge difference. It made a huge difference. Another, I think, credible authorities communicate quickly and accurately. Now, this is a challenge because you don't always have all the information at first. Uh, what should people do if they're trying to communicate something? If there's an emergency, if there's some kind of event, um, do you wait until you gather all the facts and you've heard from your team members, or do you go out with something that might be thin?
You go out with something that might be thin without saying something that isn't true.
Mm,
So
okay.
if you're a police department and you have gotten a call that there's something really bad happening across town and you don't have anybody there yet, if it is something at that really high level of alarm, put out a message that says, we have reports of an incident at, please avoid the area. We'll give you an update as soon as we can. That is like planting the flag
Okay.
so that your community knows that you're on top of it, so they don't need to keep reporting it to you. And it prevents other people from putting information out that may or may not be accurate. And that's really what you have to do.
Okay. That's great. That's great. That's I think important advice, 'cause I think a lot of folks hesitate before putting something out
Yes,
versus
that's
you know
historically an enormous problem. And the Manchester authorities, when they had the bombing of the concert, the New York City Police Department, um, those two agencies are good examples of the importance of a very quick message. I mean, NYPD has got this down pat.
Sure.
You know, message we're responding within 20 minutes, I think, is their standard. The reality is it's usually quicker than that because it has to be. I think it should be within 5 minutes. In many cases it is, but you have to come back with additional information really quickly. And NYPD is amazing at that. Their standard is within 90 minutes of a critical incident, having an actual face-to-face with reporters.
So we have a few more comments I want to bring in. Sojana says that we just published an issue of otolaryngologic. Maybe I said that right. Maybe I didn't. Otolaryngologic Clinics of North America on trauma in ENT. Terrorism is major cause in the Middle East and Africa. Guns in the U.S. Sigh. And if you did see Doug looking down at a few points, because obviously he's on camera all the time, and I like the two shots, so I keep us both on. But Rahadian left a comment on Facebook. The unfortunate thing about COVID awareness or lack thereof is that my care coordinator a year ago did not know what a bivalent booster was. I recognize that many in the mental health care industry are overworked, and I sincerely hope she had been an outlier, but I was sad, angry, and frustrated at her ignorance. Doug, is this the comment you replied to
Yes.
when you said the true problem, which is why the September 2023 shots are not called boosters? They are new shots. You don't need to have had a prior shot to get it. So if you see Doug looking down, he's actually engaging with our audience in real time, um, which I think is one of the few times I've seen our guests do that, Doug. So well done. Talk about
It's the
being on the
ADHD.
ball. What's that?
It's my well-managed ADHD.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm actually serious about that, by the way.
In terms of what?
Oh, ADHD is a pretty significant condition for many people, and in many cases, it can be very debilitating, but it also can be managed well. And I'm proud to say that I've learned some skills over the years and try to make the best of it. I know what I can do and I know what I can't do. And one of the things I can do is have two screens in front of me and function well on both.
That's great. That's great. We certainly, producing events, we often have to have multiple screens open and kind of be multitasking at the same time. I'm not going to, we can try and dig into that maybe on a different show. Uh, that is something that has been actually I'll say it's been recommended that I should see whether I should be tested for ADHD, adult ADHD. Never tested as a child or had it come up before, um, but it is something that is necessary in certain lines of work. I mean, it's people talk about multitasking being a bad thing sometimes. I don't know how I could get through my day without multitasking. When I was in an office environment with meetings almost back to back, if I wasn't checking email through my meetings, work would just stop. It wouldn't move. So uh, eh, leaning into that, I want to point out that on Instagram, we have a few more folks who are watching at least. Anjali Parekh is checking in just to see. Anjali is my sister-in-law in India, so she's like probably looking at my Instagram feed. I'm like, what is this? What's going on? Anjali, we produce this show, the New York Times Read Along, every week. Um, and up till recently, it's been Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. We were able to add Instagram this week, and actually right before the holidays was our first show simultaneously on Instagram as well. Jasmine Garcia, former colleague at United Way, is also watching on Instagram, at least checking in a little bit to see what's going on. So thank you for joining us there. We have a question. First of all, Rose is watching from Connecticut. Rose Horowitz. Follow her on all social media accounts. She has a great show herself called Women to Follow. And her first show of the year was on, I think it was Wednesday of this week. So check it out on social. I might have gotten the day wrong, so my apologies on that. Stefan asked a question, which Doug may have answered in the comments, so we'll get to that. Doug, do you think, given the type of visual world we live in, that many messages should be accompanied with some sort of alert graphic? Then it's an actual thumb stopper. And the answer, Doug, you want to give us your answer?
Yeah, visual cues, absolutely. And I mean, this is something we learned 10 years ago when Twitter started getting a lot more traffic. You had to have a graphic that would get people's attention. On Facebook, if you don't have an image of something, your post is not going to be noticed. So having a static image that is something people get used to seeing for certain types of messaging can be incredibly helpful. In doing that, though, please, please, please put yourself in the shoes of the audience and the people you're trying to reach, because I've seen a lot of bad graphics like that. You don't want to be shouting at people, and please keep those who have limitations in mind. I've seen a lot of graphics that have bad contrast or bad colors that are hard for people with color blindness to
Yeah.
see. We have a lot of people who are blind or partially blind who require assistive technology. Well, everything you put out, whether it's a visual image, graphic, or text, should be accessible to everybody, especially if it's an emergency.
Alt text is
Alt text
very
is incredibly important, but it's not.
important.
That's just one small piece
Sure.
of accessibility.
Sure.
Too many people, and I mean, yes, alt text. Please do that if you're not already doing that. It's malpractice to not, but that's like the baby step. There's some
Sure.
other things you can do. And here's the thing that I want people to really take home. Making your content accessible for those with limitations is not doing extra work that you don't need to do. It will make your content better for all of your audiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to share Stefan's comment. Doug is amazing, answering via reply on Facebook while he's on the show. Kudos, Doug. I do want to bring in this comment from Will Sutton on Twitter. ADD and ADHD can change through the years.
Yes, they do.
So appreciate that. And I also want to note my mom and I are having a little bit of dialogue here. She's thinking that it might be Anjali. There are two Anjali Parekhs in our world, in our circles. And one is a social worker, our friend's daughter. But mom, I checked Instagram. This is actually the Anjali Parekh who is Dilip Bhai's wife in India, in Malad. I checked her profile to make sure. But if we can get the other Anjali Parekh to watch, that would be great too. So let's keep going. There are a few more highlights in the book, and then we want to move to the paper, of course. I'll read a couple of these quickly. Keep focused on what really matters. If your job is to get people out of danger, make sure that your communication activities advance that purpose. If there's a life safety threat and you're not part of the response, effectively get out of the way, right? Which is really good. If you don't provide information, others will, and particularly in an area of misinformation, and when there is an emergency, that often is the case. Everyone is jumping in with information. You want to get accurate information out quickly. There's no pause button for the news cycle. Particularly now with social media, if you're in the middle of a crisis, it's 24/7, and you can expect questions at any point, not just from the media but from the public. Know your tools. Establish your channels before the next emergency. That is a really great piece. There are a few more. I want to ask you. You said that there were 10 lessons learned in the first edition, and you added 2 this time. Did you add them at the end, or are they sprinkled in to your list?
They're sprinkled in, so all of these have been updated, and of course, in one of the iterations of this section, we included the original 10, but we decided to take those out.
So this is like a brand new configuration of lessons learned.
Yeah,
Kind of. Doug is referring to both editions.
Yeah, so number 11 is new. Don't decide the type of announcement based on whether it's a good or a bad story.
Okay.
It's like, if it's a critical incident, it's a critical incident, period. Because holding back bad news is not going to make it better. And actually, I think 11 and 12 are the new ones, and communicate when situations change. We've got to do a better job of updating when things change. Even if that means come out and say, hey, we told you this, but turns out we were wrong. Here's what we know now.
So actually having the wherewithal to self-correct, to point out kind of this is an evolving story. What we put out earlier was not correct. Here's an update. I think that's hard for a lot of folks to even wrap their heads around, the idea of admitting they were wrong.
It goes to one of the problems that we had with the COVID communications, although the COVID issues were largely not a function of wrong information, being put out, but we didn't know much. But the messages that were conveyed did not properly contextualize the limitations of what we were saying. So, you know, here's what we believe now based on the best data that we have, but we're still learning this could change. And then you can come back a few weeks later and said, we now have data that tells us that COVID transmits much more easily than we expected, which is why we are changing our recommendations on masking.
Wow.
It wasn't said that succinctly.
Sure. I will point out there is a lot of dialogue. Rahadian is sharing more updates in terms of his response and his understanding of COVID and masking. But I want to pull in one comment in particular, and Doug, you could probably just stop talking now. I'm grateful for Doug Levy's leadership and advocacy, and especially for the textbook.
Thank you.
I don't know if you want to say anything else after this, because you're done. This is pretty.
Thank you.
Pretty good to get that kind of response. And I want to say I certainly appreciate you joining us today to share some of these insights. We first met. This is going to be 2018, I think it was, at Social Media Weekend, when we had an in-person conference. Many of you may have been there. I know many of you were, but I had helped organize to bring several students from Parkland, Florida, from Stoneman Douglas High School, who had dealt with the mass shooting there, to talk about how they use social media afterward. And I remember you wanted a chance to speak with them and to interview them. And that's when you and I I think we first really got to know each other, first interacted. And since then, you've been such a great supporter of the show. So I actually learned a lot, both about your work and your background, and I know that there is a lot of a parallel. I was doing a lot of crisis communications with United Way, helping support local United Ways when they were responding to incidents, whether natural disasters or mass shootings, etc. So this was fascinating for me. I certainly encourage folks to take a closer look at Doug's book, The Communications Golden Hour. Again, keeping it close so that we don't get the glare. There's the headline. You can find more information on Doug's social channels, but also on his website. Go to www.douglevy.com, and you can find more about the book and how to purchase the book.
The book should be available. It's not going to. It's a textbook, so it's not going to be on a bookstore shelf. But you should be able to order it from any bookseller.
Which is great. So with that, I want to switch gears and go to the newspaper. And certainly, we know there's going to be a lot of relevant content there around emergency communications, health communications in particular. So we'll go ahead and switch gears. And Doug, of course, as we go through the paper, if there's something that comes up that you want to talk about, please feel free, particularly if I skip over something, but I'm sure that we'll pick on a couple issues, and I know there's some front page stories that might get our attention. So let's take a look at the newspaper together. Again, we talked about the what's on the front page, how Harvard came to oust its president to gain backing. Trump exercises fear and favor. But there's a story on the bottom of the paper, bottom half of the paper. FAA grounds some Boeing MAX 9s after scare. Now, in terms of the news item, there was a flight out of Portland, and this is a picture, if you can see on the screen, that it's a section of the plane was actually pulled off and exposing the passengers to the open air. They weren't that high. I think they were at
16,000.
16,000. I was going to say 14. 16,000 feet. The oxygen mask came down. There were only one or two injuries. It's not the nightmare scenario of someone getting sucked out, but certainly that picture gives you the impression that that could have happened.
If somebody was in that seat, it
No one
could
was in
have
that window
been
seat,
worse.
luckily. But what have you what are your takeaways from the media coverage of this particular incident?
So this Time story is actually one of the better ones that I've seen. I was cringing last night. I'm a bit of an aviation buff. I fly a lot. I'm also a very loyal Alaska Airlines frequent flyer, so I'm a little bit partial to them. I think from a communication standpoint, by the way, Alaska's handled this really, really well. But this was an incredibly scary incident. This is the sort of thing that's not supposed to happen on an airplane, especially one that's only 10 weeks old. This one went into service, I think, October 31st. Even major media outlets have gotten this story completely wrong. I saw headlines 24 hours after the incident that were still saying it was an exit door that blew out or a window that blew out. Well, yeah, there was a window in the panel, but well, not really. It was a piece of the fuselage, sheet metal, bolted in place that was a cutout in case an exit door needed to be added later to accommodate a larger passenger load. Very few stories accurately said that. This Time story actually explains it really well, and even has a quote from the subcontractor to Boeing that was involved in doing the bolting. So this Time story is much, much better than what we've seen. But the number of media outlets that just jump with minimal information and then don't update when they learn more. It's like, if your first headline was the best you had at the time, fine. But when you get more information, fix the damn headline.
And Stefan is saying that picture of the plane losing some of its body in mid-flight freaked me out. That is, I'm hoping that people, if not, I'm going to raise it up just a little bit to the camera so people can see. That's, this is foam on the side of the panel. These are seats right here, and this is obviously taken after the plane landed. But some of the quotes are from people saying that they could see the city lights from that 16,000 foot altitude.
Yeah, you absolutely could. I mean, this is exactly the sort of thing that's never supposed to happen. The other thing which is reassuring is I have not had a chance to listen to the air traffic control or pilot communications yet, but from people who have listened to it, the flight and also from the passengers on the plane, the flight crew apparently was just like completely cool, calm, and just nobody was freaking out. And none of the people responsible for handling this were freaking out, which clearly contributed to the fact that everybody got off that plane safely with minimal injuries. But it's not supposed to happen. Alaska Airlines actually was very quick to ground all of the planes of this type to do inspections. They did some very quick inspections overnight and put some of them back into service yesterday morning. Then they grounded them again because the FAA put out a slightly different airworthiness directive. So it's going to disrupt travel on probably United and Alaska for a little while, but it's a safety check, which we want. Got to figure out what happened here.
I want to pull in a comment from Rose Horowitz from earlier, appreciating the shout out about our Women to Follow show. Stefan helps produce the show for her, and they were on Instagram for the first time. It was a interview with writer and filmmaker Lucina Fisher. Again, I'm hoping that's a correct pronunciation on her name. Ron Thomas is saying hello from Verona, New Jersey. Ron is a former guest on the show, friend of the show. Sujana says that she thought the passenger being able to take that pic was amazing. That was again on the ground, and you see it isn't at the height of the emergency. But just even being able to get that pic and get that out there, that's a passenger pic that was shared. Stefan says, "Thank heavens for top-notch flight crews." And I want to point out, if we're talking about flight crews, there was the incident in Japan just about a week ago, right, where a passenger jet crashed into a Air National Guard plane on the runway and burst into flames, and everyone got out safely.
347 people.
Now, I will mention, I remember seeing a post that the New York Times article focused on how well it was managed, and good training and passengers heeding instructions led to that good outcome. The Wall Street Journal headline on that same incident talked about chaos and just a complete breakdown in communications. Did you see that? Did you notice those?
I did, and I, even though I'm an aviation buff, I haven't been able to dive into that one quite as much as I will, because the whole concept of how we communicate to passengers in that safety briefing and so on is something I have studied in the past, and I want to see how it played out. We know from many real experiences that, particularly in the United States, even if the plane is on fire, we have people grabbing their baggage from the overhead bin as they're trying to get out the exits, and that's how people wind up dying. So the FAA and the airlines have worked very hard to try to improve the messaging on some of that stuff, and clearly in Japan, they got those people out just in time. Just spectacularly good outcome. That requires discipline, and it's intense training, because the main thing is you've got to have a crew that knows exactly not only what to do from a technical standpoint, but how to tell people. And I have friends who are flight crew members, and they do a lot of training on exactly this point. If there's an emergency, what words do you use to tell people get out?
Sure.
But it's really hard, and it has to continually evolve. Every time there's an incident, good or bad, we have to study what happened, good or bad, because even the best outcomes teach us things that we can do better next time.
Sujana says that 2 of her kids flew out yesterday, shortly after the incident. No stress at all. Sujana, I'm sure that you were just saying all sorts of prayers, which I totally would understand. Dr. Tachi, definitely a scary event. Absolutely. I've done quite a bit of flying myself. I've never had that been in the middle of that kind of incident. I don't know that I'd want to. Rahadian says, I think that TV shows tend to portray corporate communications as the Department of CYA, but they are far more about promulgation of accurate information to assist media outlets and the general public. Absolutely. Thank you, Rahadian. And our friend Marilyn says good morning to both Doug and I. And she said she actually once went down the slide in an evacuation. She felt safe and still flies. So that's great, Marilyn. Thank you for sharing that. Stefan shares, even though we all know him as the photographer and the importance of getting the shot, I don't know if I would have been able to compose myself mid-flight and get that shot. It would have been once the plane landed. Never get in the way of an emergency situation. Safety first. Absolutely. Absolutely. And following up on that, folks who just put the smartphones down and help before trying to get a shot. Helping involves not getting in the way. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's go ahead and see what else is in the paper. Thank you for that discussion, Doug. Really appreciate it. That was good. So in the front page section, let's dig into this a little bit. On page 2 and page 3, and if folks remember, we had Megan DeTrolio on last year when they redid these 2 pages. It's always fascinating to see what they're doing here. The story behind the story, which is my favorite section. It's the Inside the Times. That's really what I bill our show as. A day at the New York Times cooking studio. Lights, camera, and teamwork help complete a recipe's journey from concept to publication. For all the New York Times cooking aficionados will want to check this out. Doug, are you you do a lot of cooking? You share a lot on Facebook. Are you a New York Times cooking fan?
Yes, I am. I actually had the privilege of hearing from one of the reporters that was tasked with going through the archives and updating many of the recipes from the 50s and elsewhere. And yeah, I love the New York Times cooking app. The archives are incredible, and really all along, the Times has had the highest standards for food news, and their recipes are highly tested. Their photography is spectacular. Andrew Scriviani, who's one of the most renowned food photographers in the world, was one of the main shooters for the Times cooking section for many years. And I mean, a lot of people that are very good at food photography have learned from him. And it's a whole studio. The whole photography thing is a separate part from the recipe development and testing piece, because it has to be.
Sure.
If you do it that way, you're going to wind up publishing recipes that actually work, that people can do.
Absolutely. On the right-hand side of the page, the Dateline section, where Times journalists are reporting from around the world. And I'm just going to point out a little bit in terms of language. When I read it out, I inserted the word "from," and you'll see it here on the big screen. It might be hard for you to read, so I'll pull this up just a little bit if you can see the text. It says the way they do it, where Times journalists are reporting around the world, as opposed to reporting from around the world. That's an interesting nuance in terms of the language. Killington, Vermont, Santiago, Chile, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Cianjur, Indonesia. Again, explaining highlighting the international nature of the Times' coverage. Here's a piece by David Dunlap, again, another favorite section, exploring an artifact from the archives of the New York Times. A journalist's promise, without fear or favor, seems to be in favor. The phrase, a poetic way of saying impartiality, turned up incidentally among the passages from the writings of Dr. Claudine Gay that critics said were plagiarized. Dr. Gay resigned January 2nd. The New York Times has a proprietary stake in the phrase, as it is central to the newspaper's credo. On August 19th, 1896, when Adolph Ochs gained control of the Times, he promised readers in an announcement published in the newspaper that the Times, under his management, would give the news impartially, without fear or favor. There's an incredible museum on the top floor of the Times. We had the privilege of visiting when we interviewed Jake Silverstein in his office over the summer, part of my birthday week in New York. And then we got a tour of the museum. Absolutely incredible. Still hoping to get a visit with David Dunlap, who curates the museum, and sharing with you all in a future show. International long gone hockey team remains symbol of nationalist pride. This is from Quebec. Terrorism at home exposes the vulnerability Iran doesn't want to admit. That was a bombing by Islamic State at the funeral of Major General Qasem Soleimani. More international stories. This is a story about Ukraine. We need more U.S. missiles to shield Ukraine. For Indonesia's president, a term is ending, but a dynasty is beginning. The elder son of the president is running to succeed him, greeting supporters in Jakarta in October. Hezbollah firing rockets into Israel a day after a key loss for Hamas. U.S. is loath to lose vital airbase that Niger coup threw into limbo. Here's an interesting piece. Kim Jong-un's daughter is seen as heir. The young daughter of North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, who has frequently accompanied her father at public events, is Mr. Kim's most likely successor should he die. according to the South Korean news intelligence agency. So here's the article I mentioned earlier in the beginning. Economy is up, mood is down. What gives? It's like 1948 all over again, drawing parallels between 2024, the 2024 election, and the 48 election. In that case, the incumbent president was reelected in a stunner. You might remember the headline: "Dewey defeats Truman," which proved not to be true. Let's hope that we have a Biden defeats Trump. Please, please, please make it so. 3 years after January 6th, Trump clings to campaign message of falsehoods. Here's an interesting piece. Joe Biden gave a speech. Was it yesterday? And I think it was Friday, right? In Valley Forge, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
On January 6th. And there have been some articles about how Trump and Biden, are both using January 6th, but draw very different lessons from it. What do you think of this in terms of just the layout, Doug? Having the headline focus on Trump's approach to January 6th, but having Biden's picture there.
So, as a reader, that is confusing to me. I don't envy the editors that have to come up with the headlines, but it would seem to me that a headline, if they're going to have a story that is really looking at both of the candidates, the headline should probably reflect that as well. Or the photo should. Or they should have
two photos or something. Right?
That would be my preference. But I think this is a good example where media outlets are hopefully inadvertently and not deliberately playing into some of the messaging of one side or the other. Mm-hmm. The Biden age issue, which you've talked about on the show quite a bit. The less we see visually of the other candidate, the more people can fixate on Biden's age and overlook the fact that the other candidate's only 3 years younger.
Sure. I want to call out a few folks who are watching to say hi. Sonny Slaughter says good morning to Neil and Doug and the entire New York Times Read Along family. Sonny, thank you so much for logging in and joining us. Apollo is saying good morning from Philadelphia. Thank you, Apollo. And Rahadian says, Inshallah, Biden defeats Trump. I'm not sure what TFG stands for. Doug, you tell me if you recognize that. Rahadian, we might need a little help with that. Let us know in the comments. Lippy says good morning from good morning from Manhattan. Lippy is another longtime friend of the show, and she'll be joining us in February. I don't have the date on the top of my mind, but she'll be joining the show. Make sure you catch it then.
And Dr. Roy, by the way, is a really good example of a healthcare professional who has truly mastered the art of public communication. And her ability to take what she does with patients and think of the patient base as the broader population is really what we want more people with scientific and other technical skills to do.
Brava to Lippy Roy. Doug, thank you very much for that endorsement. I'll be looking for that clip and sharing that when she's on the air with us later in February. Rahadian clarified TFG is the former guy, Trump. We are just scratching the surface of this week's paper, and it's already 9:49 Eastern time. Doug, are you trying to give us a little view out your window?
I'm looking to see if it's probably too dark, but the Hollywood sign is
right there somewhere.
Let's see if I can get a better shot.
Well, if we stay on a little longer, we might see it. Not too long, but we'll give it a few more minutes. And Sonny endorses your comments about Lippy. Thank you, Sonny, for that. I do want to give a shout out. Joining us on Instagram, James Sims, uh, from joining from Middletown, Connecticut, is watching on Instagram. James works in communications at my alma mater, Wesleyan University. Always thrilled when you could join us, James. Thank you for your support. And we also have an ID I don't recognize. Um, Musa Jawara 55 watching on Instagram. So thank you very much for that. Let's go ahead and see whether we can get a few more articles in before we need to call it a day. And I'll just run a ticker about next week's guest, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but let you read that as we go. Here's it's an fun story, but this is from the front page. Here lie Rex, Fluffy, and a mystery woman, a pet cemetery in Hartsdale, New York, not far from where I grew up. And here they gave a lot of real estate for this story. This would be worth taking a look at a little bit later. Page and a half, page and 2/3 almost inside. Let's see, what else do we have quickly? This article about award speeches and the political tension there. So let's see what we can quickly see in the Sunday opinion section. Again, I was expecting more about January 6th, at least on the front page. Let's see, there's an article by Ross Douthat, I think if you pronounce that correctly, An Agent or Accident of History. Trump may be just an American expression of worldwide trends. And then here's interesting. I haven't seen this before. Witness Portraits of the People Living the News. So this, you see this image on the left. It's a little dark for you, but the text at the bottom. I coach people and publish a newsletter about finding friendship and creating community. This time of year, everyone's thinking about all the ways they should be different, and it's a terrible amount of pressure. But it's the perfect time to put yourself out there and have new experiences. The biggest tip I give people is to be clear about who you want to be and who you want to be with, because that's going to shape who you are. Here's a great question. If Trump is not an insurrectionist, what is he? An op-ed by Jamel Bowie. The former president is just the man the 14th Amendment had in mind. Another Trump article on the bottom by Maureen Dowd. Time to conquer hell. Trump tries to pass himself off as Christ-like. I don't even know what to say about that, Doug. I don't even know what to say. The thin blue line that divides America. That was, I think, on the front page was referenced. Claudine Gay debacle was never about merit. A vague term is useful for creating slippery slopes. And then the hostages' families expose Israel's failures. Many want to find a political path to bringing the remaining captives home. Here's an interesting piece. I think that was referred to on the front page. New York has room for housing. A big 2-page spread. Vishan Chakrabarti, the founder of Practice for Architecture and Urbanism, a New York City architecture firm, and a former director of planning for Manhattan, talking about low rises, office conversions, high rises, mid rises. New York could definitely use more housing. All right, here's a Taylor Swift, again, 2 pages. And this is an opinion piece by Anna Marks, an editor in opinion. Look what we made Taylor Swift do. And I read this article online earlier because I'm now reading everything I see on Taylor Swift. This is a challenging piece. This is effectively it has been referred to as controversial. I certainly think so. It gives the impression that when Taylor Swift released her Lover album, she was almost leaning toward coming out, and didn't quite get there. And there are questions of whether or not she was doing that, whether she was trying to hint at that, or whether she was just trying to be an ally, surrounding herself in queer iconography. Um, there's a lot in this piece, and I just have to say, I don't think that was necessary. I don't think that we need that kind of speculation about people. I just don't. I promised my sister I would write about how she chose to die. Stephen Petro, a contributing columnist at the Washington Post, and author most recently of Stupid Things I Won't Do When I Get Old. Medical aid in dying allowed Julie to have power over how her life ended. And then the editorial, this election year is unlike any other. I don't remember the Sunday opinion section having editorials at the back of the section. That might be a new layout. Interesting. So that is the opinion section. There's their back page, practicing a mission to Mars in a desert in Utah with photographs. To live on the red planet, humans will need to bring along reminders of home. We're hitting 9:56, and I don't know that we're going to be able to get too much more of the paper. And I wanted to make sure that we do a couple of announcements that I didn't give at the beginning of the show, so I will do that now. Want to make sure that we give credit to our sponsor, Muckrack. Muckrack has been a longtime sponsor of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Thank you very much for all of your support over the years. We also want to remind folks that the show is produced by Digimentors, the consulting firm that Sri as co-founded with his friend Andrew Lee. We do digital marketing, events and digital programs, strategic communications, trainings and workshops. We also help with recruiting. We've also been doing a lot more event amplification and AI workshops. So if you're interested, please let us know. Get in touch. Next week, we're going to have a special show. Ernie Suggs will make a return appearance. He works with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So it'll be an AJC read along. And we will focus on a documentary that they put together. The South Got Something to Say, another in our series of shows dealing with the 50th anniversary of hip hop. It started in August with Adrian Green when we had a special New York Times Magazine issue on hip hop at 50. And it continued to our last show of the year. Walter Grayson and Tim Fielder were our guests. They wrote a graphic history of hip hop. And we had them on right before the holidays. So Ernie will be following in that line. Please do join us MLK weekend. We'll also be talking about MLK, of course, with Ernie. I want to make sure we bring in a couple of comments, and then we'll bring Doug back on the screen to share some final thoughts. But a few other comments that have come in as we were looking at some of the articles. Lippy says, so blessed by your kind feedback and honored by your kind feedback. More clinical stories to share in my next read-along interview. Absolutely. And Rahadian says, anything I could say about Trump's being Christ-like would get me banned from Facebook. We don't want that, Rahadian. My mom says, thank you. It was a good educational show, and Happy New Year to the New York Times Read Along family. Apollo calls it blasphemy for what Trump is saying about being Christ-like. I can smell sulfur. Rahadian, I agreed with my comment about the Taylor Swift article. People's sexuality, even if they are public figures, are their own business. The New York Times should be above any speculation. thank you, Rahadian. Linda had to sign off just before 10 o'clock, but thank you for joining us, Linda. And Rahadian says thank you to Neil and Doug and the producers, everyone here. Blessings to all. And Jonathan says great show. Thank you. So let's go ahead and bring Doug back on. I think we're going to get a view of out the window. There we go. Doug, what are we looking at out there?
You can't see it so well on my. I can't zoom in very well, but the Hollywood sign is just to the left of that tower at the top of the hill.
Right. I can just kind of make it out. It's about on the right-hand third of the screen. You see a little bit of a white section in the green. That's the Hollywood sign, folks, in LA. And joining us toward the end, Cherie is saying greetings from Beverly Hills. For folks who are right down the block, for folks who are joining us late, want to remind you that you would be able to watch the show from the beginning on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. As soon as the show is over, just a few minutes after, you'll be able to go right to the beginning. I'll need a little extra time to get the video up on our Instagram, on my Instagram account, but it will be there as well. So you'll be able to watch it if you want to. We have a few other folks who joined on Instagram. Artsy96 and VBD Marie are also watching on Instagram. So thank you for that. Marilyn is asking, where is Doug? Doug is in LA this weekend. And outside of his usual Marin County haunts outside San Francisco. And he just answered in Facebook today, I am in Hollywood, or just within shouting distance at least. Are you technically in Hollywood, or?
Well, Hollywood is not Hollywood is a neighborhood in Los Angeles, but I'm actually right smack in the center. I'm walking distance from the theater where the Oscars are held.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And this is Hollywood. This is the main intersection that I'm at, because I'm here doing some family things, and my parents live close to here.
And Dr. Tachi says, beautiful. Apollo says it's a great way to start the week. Have a glorious week ahead, everyone. Before we let Doug go, final thoughts about health communications, emergency communications. What would you like to share with folks?
No matter what your beat is, if you're a reporter, if you are thrust into an emergency or any kind of scientific or technical situation, please, please, please be mindful that the words you use in your stories could have an impact on people's lives. So it's not a horse race. It's a matter of getting accurate information to people. Instead of portraying things as contests, focus on getting facts and actionable information to the people who need it.
Great advice. Great advice from our friend Doug Levy, a health communications expert, author of The Communications Golden Hour. This is the second edition of the book. Certainly encourage folks to pick it up and share it with anyone you think might find it useful. Stefan already did that himself. Again, want to encourage you to join us next week. Ernie Suggs will be our guest. It will be an AJC read-along, focusing on the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and the documentary they put together on hip-hop, The South Got Something to Say. We want to thank everyone, and also appreciate Doug jumping in on YouTube to thank everyone watching there as well. That's always great, because we do get people watching across multiple channels. So thank you for that. Marilyn says to have a great day, and we'll close it with Sunny's comment. Thank you for including me as one of the experts in your latest crisis communications manifesto. It is an honor, and I am humbled. Great. Another word of praise from our New York Times read-along family. We have great experts here sharing their insights with you. not just from our family, but also from other guests as well. Thank you very much, Doug. Thanks again for joining us early California time. It's about 7 a.m. your time. You can get on with the rest of your morning, having started at 4 a.m. your time. Thank you. And Doug's
Thanks for having
comment.
me.
Thank you for the great comments, questions, and feedback. We'll see everyone next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.